Welcome back to Sirius XM Insight. I'm John Fugelsang. Thank you so much for joining us, and we're so glad that Peter Kiernan has joined us once again. He is one of our favorites. He is former senior partner at Goldman Sachs, is the best-selling author of Becoming China's Bitch and American Mojo. And Peter, it's been great having you here. You're helping us make so much sense of the campaign and the entire political season. At this point, seeing how the Trump campaign has maneuvered, I'm more afraid of it becoming Russia's bitch than becoming China's at this point. What is the situation at this point with Putin, and how much influence do you think he holds in this campaign?
Well, I think it's a great question because I don't think he's been stronger in a very long time. Even though there's a lot of worry back in Mother Russia, he has been highly effective. And the way I would describe it, I was searching, I think it's a mental invasion. I think what he's doing is searching for the weak spots, searching for areas where we're not very strong, and he's going there.
Give me an example.
He's been highly methodical. So I'll give you two. One is the first person to call Erdogan, the president of Turkey, who was the subject of a 30-some-hour coup.
Very scary.
The first phone call was not from a NATO ally, not from the United States or Britain. The first phone call was from Vladimir Putin, saying, I object to regime change. I object to what's going on. And, it was only a year ago that Erdogan and his army had shot a Russian plane out of the sky. So this was a big shift, seismic. It was a test. So how did Erdogan respond? Once he got things more or less squared away, who was the first foreign leader he went to see? Not a NATO ally, not the people who surround him. No, he went to see Vladimir Putin. And what Putin has a unique knack of doing is finding the spot when we're at our worst, when European and American relations when Turkey were at their worst. Suddenly, out of nowhere, out of enmity, remember he shot down one of my planes, Putin shifts and says, let's do a reset, a true reset. Let's exchange an olive branch and try and work this out between us.
In this destructive conflict with Syria, how much of a power player is Putin? And is it fair to say that if there's anyone who could ever possibly win this horrible carnage, it would be Putin?
Well, Putin has handled himself with great dexterity here in this respect. He let Iran be the major ally of Syria for a long time and then offered to help out. And by offering to help out, what he was able to achieve is a couple of things. One is he has access to two ports, but he also has a very, very nice, now permanent, Air Force landing facility for himself in Syria.
But did he bet on the wrong horse and then make the wrong horse the right horse by ISIS proving there were many more wrong horses than Assad?
Well, ISIS, what it did is it gave him the socially acceptable reason to be there, right, and to bomb ISIS. But while he was at it, he also, as we know, Putin and his army has had a proclivity to bomb some of the more moderate forces. And at the same time, chastise us about regime change over and over. He obsesses, apparently in meetings, obsesses over the regime change involving Gaddafi in Libya and the way that he was brought down. And use it.
Because, Putin hates regime change unless it's Georgia.
Well, Georgia or
Ukraine.
Crimea. Although I think in a way Crimea fits because he didn't need to do that. Crimea was always hugely influenced by Russia.
He didn't need to.
And he had the Black Sea, Sebastopol. He had that great, his naval base there. So he didn't need to do it. Why did he do it? I think it was a test.
Yeah.
He did it because he could. Now,
he did it to see if he could get away with it under Obama the way he got away with it under Bush.
Well, I think what he did is he's taking the measure. That's what I mean by this sort of it's a mental invasion. It's not really an invasion, although in this case it was an invasion. But you get my point that he's testing. So here's what he was testing. In this crazy world, at one stage, 15, 20 years ago, the Ukraine had the number 3 arsenal of nuclear weapons, which is sort of an accident of history, but there we are. And so the U.S. and Britain went to the Ukraine and said, tell you what, if you disarm, we'll be there for you. We will be there to help you. So disarm, and you can count on the USA and Britain to be there. Naturally, with that kind of promise, what did the Ukraine do? They disarmed. And they developed over the next 10 years a pretty decent dialogue. And in fact, we're even talking to the EU about perhaps joining. So what was the test? The test was that this would be a red line that we and the Brits would not cross, and we didn't. And so when the Crimea invasion or annexation, or however you want to describe it, occurred, and then some incursions into Ukraine, as you identified, happened, what was our response? A stern talking.
Exactly. No different than what Bush did when they invaded Georgia.
And so, unfortunately, since 1999 or wherever, I think that was about when he made the scene, Putin has basically been testing us and saying, I don't believe that the Americans are going to be as forceful. They don't have the military might they once had. They don't have the economic might they must have. But more important than any of that, they are so happy. In 1989, in Malta, the Cold War was declared closed by George H.W. Bush and Boris Yeltsin. Well, I'm introducing not the certainty, but just the aroma of a resurgence of the Cold War, and I think that's what Putin is testing here.
Let me ask you, Peter, if that's the case, is embarrassing Obama something he cares about, or is it all just a test? I mean, is Russia the reason Obama allowed his Syrian red line to move?
Well, I have to say, all you have to look is the stare down. There's not a lot, the contempt between these two is pretty thinly disguised. But I would say this, that one of the things that is troubling me, and that's why your question is such a good one, is that if you look at what Putin's doing now, it's almost, God, don't get me in trouble for saying this, it's just you and me talking, but it's almost statesmanlike. He went to see the Saudi prince this week at the G20 and saying, listen, OPEC is getting crushed. So a lot of your listeners, OPEC, what is OPEC doing? I can put all of OPEC politics in a very simple sort of construct. 3 years ago, OPEC did $1.2 trillion in revenues. That was a superpower. This year, probably something like $400 billion.
Oh, believe me, there's a reason all of our friends at Al Jazeera America are out of business.
Yeah, there's been an absolute meltdown in value, and the trouble is that it may be that the Saudis can stomach that, but if you're in Venezuela, you have to pump, because if you don't pump, you don't live. If you're in Nigeria and some of these places, you have to pump in order to survive, because they develop spending patterns back when oil was at $100 plus a barrel, and now it ain't anywhere close to that.
And that's back when Putin made a lot of promises about his Russian oil when running for re-election.
No question. He got to that 80% approval rating on the strength of that oil. And so, but what's interesting, he went under the guise of, and as you described, it obviously would benefit him a great deal to have oil prices go up. So he went to see the Saudi prince, and he said something along these lines. Look, you've made your point, okay? You're the king of the jungle, but why don't we have just a deal where we're going to cap everybody's production? I'm at a record production level. You're at a record production level. Let's cap everybody except for Iran. Let's give them a little runway. And we give them a little runway because the USA was kind of unfair to them. I've had sanctions. It sucks having sanctions. Here is Iran. They're doing their best. Why don't you give them a break? And out of that came some dovish language that maybe I'll think about it. They didn't say we'll do it, but maybe we'll think about it. Because Iran, there was a meeting at OPEC in Doha in April where Iran said, listen, either we get to produce back to where we were before all this started, or we're not going to go. And so they didn't even show up to the OPEC meeting, which is a bad start.
One of the reasons environmentalists have been so critical of President Obama is we're now at a point where there has never been more drilling stateside in America than there is right now. Has this in any way impacted this oil market, and has the increased number of wells in America had any economic impact on what's going on in the Middle East?
Oh, it's definitely had an impact because, we went from being, 3-4 million barrels a day to 8, 9, 10 if we can really stretch ourselves. Now, right now...
It's almost like Sarah Palin said, drill, baby, drill, and when nobody was looking, the Democrats did.
Well, I have to say, what happened was they were looking in some of the wrong places. So we have had a big fallback in the number of drills, platforms that are operating in the Gulf, in our Gulf of Mexico. But if you look at the change that's occurred in fracking, that is a fundamental shift. And unlike wells are complicated. You can't shut them off. It's not like opening a Coca-Cola, urging them back. It's a seduction to get the oil out. When you're fracking, you just it's a manufacturing process. You just do it and you stop. But fracking is uncovering all kinds of oil. Now, a lot of the oil is predicated on $50 a barrel pricing. but we're close to that. And a lot of these folks are sitting there because here's the problem for the American oil industry. It was the worst of both worlds. What do I mean? Well, on one hand, interest rates were low, low, low. That's one siren song. That's pretty appealing, which says borrow. And then if you're in the oil business, suddenly oil prices are $150. You know, they're way over $100. So it says drill, drill, drill because it's so cheap. Now these folks have a ton of debt. So they're going to keep drilling and keep producing oil. Why? Because they got to pay off that debt. Even if they're losing money, if they can service their debt, they live to fight another day.
Peter, does it concern you that our media is spending more time talking about Hillary Clinton's coughing patterns than what's going on at the G20?
See, it really, I have to say, what's frustrating me about this whole process is not necessarily how I feel about the quality of the two candidates, which we could go on, but more
we can go on, yeah.
But more that the real issues. I mean, honest to God, the real issues. Creating jobs, dealing with oil economy, dealing with the fact that we have literally negative interest rates in a lot of the world and no real economic growth anywhere but the United States. So at 1.1%, we're suddenly the gold standard. What's happening is the major issues aren't being discussed, and it helps me in selling my books perhaps, but it's frustrating me as an American because we're not really focused. And by the way, I don't even know, faced with the real issues, what either one of these candidates are actually going to do.
Well, but then this gets back to my whole point. The real bad guy in this media is not Trump. Haters going to hate, and it's not the Republicans in the Congress, and it's not the Trump supporters. The bad guy here is the media. The media is addicted to ratings. The media needs a horse race, and the media would rather talk about Hillary Clinton's emails than about what these candidates are going to do to create manufacturing jobs here in the States. I mean, I don't hear the media doing anything but trying to play up the personality race to serve only themselves. That's great if you've got stock in one of these companies. However, it leads to a really uninformed populace. And when you've got a really uninformed populace, you can have two people who've been famous for 30 years and people still don't know who to vote for because we're not talking issues.
Right. I don't really know. You know, whatever you think about John McCain, I sort of had a sense that when he came to a fork in the road, I knew which way he would go. I felt more or less the same way about Clinton and the same way about George W. Bush and George W. Bush, that give me a fact pattern and I'll guess reasonably well which way they're going to turn. I do not know with Hillary Clinton, honestly, how she's going to react to this. I'll give you an example. One of the things that's being tested right now by Rolls-Royce is they're doing mercantile shipping entirely through drone maneuvering, which is to say they're delivering ships at sea with cargo with no crew. Now, what does that mean for all those people who work in the merchant marine business? The fact is we're looking now at driverless trucks, driverless cars. Those are millions of jobs that are going to be disrupted, okay? And there are some states where truck driving is one of the top, literally one of the top 1, 2, or 3 occupations.
Oh, yeah.
So there's an issue. There's a wave offshore.
By the way, sorry to interrupt, but I have not heard this issue. This is the first time I've heard this issue discussed in the media, what he's talking about right now.
Well, that's why we invite smart people on here. You know, that said, of course, we'll be talking about, Trump's hair later. But go ahead, Peter.
No, honestly, the thing that frustrates me is what they're going to find is just by increasing the economy, you will not increase jobs. That's not how it works anymore. So this notion that, the economy's not growing. If it grows faster, we'll get more jobs. Wrong.
Yeah.
Wrong.
It means nothing. That just means the rich are getting richer is what it means.
That what we've changed, what used to take a generation. So we make more steel today than we did in 1980. But we do it with only 25% of the workers because there's been
automation,
productivity and automation and all kinds of things. Well, that used to take 25 years, ample time for you and I to retrain or do something else. But if you look at the speed of disruption, it's picking up. So that there are studies that say that 40% of the jobs in the country will be disrupted in the next 25 years. Now, nobody can know whether that's true, but let's use that as a thematic approach to creating jobs. You simply can't create jobs by cutting interest rates to the bone and hoping that companies borrow and invest and grow and hire people. It's not how it works.
Are Donald Trump and many liberals correct in saying that NAFTA is a culprit in this?
I think Donald Trump is all wet on trade, that there is no... If you look at where we sit today, 95% of the world's consumers 80% of the world's economic growth, and frankly, almost all the purchasing power, almost all of it, is outside our border. We're 350 million people, and that means there's 7 billion more outside, all with emerging economies. There is no future for our middle class, none, without a major, aggressive, offensive, assertive, expansionist trade policy. We have to trade over there, or we're not going to make it. There's not enough growth and demand at home to feed the needs of our middle class. There simply isn't.
But can that alone do it? And by the way, I say this because, NAFTA, I'm inclined to agree with Ross Perot's position on that because I supported the president at the time, but I'm still waiting for our NAFTA prize to come in the mail. We were promised that the jobs would go overseas and somehow new jobs would pop up here. Did that happen?
Well, here's the thing. It's a two-step, just as you say, like any dance. And what we've done is we've got the first step down perfectly. We have exported a whole lot of jobs overseas. At that, we are extremely
we did
good.
that part right.
We do that without fail. But what we have not been good at, in fact, signally failed at, in my opinion, is saying, okay, what do we do now? What are the new jobs we create now? And I'll give you just one number that, to me, encapsulates it, is that China sees this. So they graduate 30% of their college graduates with science, technology, engineering, and math degrees, because that's the essence of the new value added where the new jobs are going to be. The United States is closer to 8%. Now, if you're talented in science, technology, engineering, math, in China, that's your way out. Mm-hmm. And at a very early age, they nurture, develop, identify you. Our problem is really one of talent management. We have an exceptionally talented workforce, and before that, even a youth force. What are we doing? There are probably 20,000 kids are going to graduate, and I'll say 10,000 kids are going to graduate high school in New York City with an A average. How many for those 10,000, plus we have 1.2 million schools, how many of those have high-quality guidance to the next step? At the adjacencies, when we bring home millions of veterans from foreign wars and conflicts, what do we do with the adjacencies? If you fire everyone, or if a plant leaves Flint, Michigan, we're leaving the people there to try and hope something else comes. And there will not be a plant that grows out of the ground in Flint, Michigan that says you, Mr. or Ms. Arc Welder, are going to have another job. Mm-hmm. The disruption is absolutely there. It's a wave offshore that has now landed. What are we doing here to put people in a position where they are prepared to take these jobs?
We've only got like 30 seconds left, and I want you to come back and do the show whenever you want, Peter, because we always love having you here at the Love Fest. But are the rumors that Putin has inordinate sway over the Trump campaign valid, or was that more of a Manafort thing?
Listen, I think Manafort was a beacon. He was a magnet for inquiry, and how he could have taken that job knowing that he had that relationship with the Ukraine, and then once this whole thing came up.
How could Bannon take the job knowing that he was a wife beater, cokehead with a rap sheet?
Not affecting anything.
Yeah, I don't think the staff of commentary is going to have any impact. I do know Steve Bannon. He's a master of message.
He's a brilliant guy.
And he is very effective.
Peter Kiernan is the author of Becoming China's Bitch and American Mojo. It is a pleasure, sir, always to have you on the show. I hope you'll join us again as soon as you're willing, because we never have enough time. We'll be right back taking your calls at 877-9-SIRIUS.